Hey, welcome to Starbound. I'm Daniel Pierce, and I'm going to be your narrator today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories. That's including Sunspire Academy and Frarian and Rimiki. If you'd like to unlock early access and support our new episodes and series, tap join below and become a Starbound member today. Now, let's get into today's story.
Hugo Harmon's knuckles whiten against the control yoke as another corporate patrol drone screamed past his view screen. The battered harvester ship, the Scifi, groaned in protest, its hull patches stretching under the strain of the evasive maneuver. For the third generation in a row, a Harmon was stealing what rightfully belonged to everyone, or so his father had put it. Just 10 more minutes. Hugo muttered to himself, working the extraction arm deeper into the asteroid's nickel iron core. The scanner showed 93% capacity in the hold, worth enough to keep him flying for another 3 months at least. Maybe even enough to replace that shot coolant regulator that left his cabin freezing at night and boiling during work shifts. The drone banked hard, its sensor array pivoting toward his position. Hugo swore, abandoning any pretense of stealth. The corporate bastards had found him.
Scifi, this is Galaxian Consortium Security, a flat voice announced over the comm. You are in violation of restricted mining sector GX-479. Power down immediately and prepare for boarding and seizure.
Hugo triggered the emergency release, yanking the harvester arm free from the asteroid. The ship lurched violently as ore clumps tumbled into his hold.
Sorry, assholes. Family business isn't for sale.
He punched the comm off and slammed the thrusters to full. The drone fired a warning shot that became decidedly unwelcoming as it carved a molten gash across his port stabilizer. Critical warnings flashed across his console: atmospheric leak in the cargo bay, destabilizing power grid, failing navigation system. This was worse than a warning. They were trying to disable him. A second patrol vessel emerged from behind the neighboring asteroid, weapon ports already glowing hot. Hugo had seconds to decide.
Fuck it.
He slapped the emergency FTL initiator, the one system his father had assisted on upgrading even when they couldn't afford reactor fuel. The jump calculator flashed red warnings. No coordinates locked, no approved course, gravitational anomalies detected. Hugo overrode them all. The stars stretched, his ears popped. The universe contracted to a pinprick of agony behind his eyes. Then, blackness. The first thing Hugo noticed was weight. Crushing, omnipresent weight pressing into every cell of his body. Even his eyelids felt impossibly heavy as he forced them open. Reddish light filtered through a spiderweb of cracks in his view screen. His first attempt to move sent lightning bolts of pain down his spine. His second attempt got his hand to the environmental controls. The readout confirmed that his straining lungs already suspected 1.8 standard gravity.
Where the hell?
He croaked, each word an effort. The sensor array was dead, but through the damaged view screen, he could make out a harsh landscape of dark, jagged rock formations under a rust-colored sky. Twisted vegetation, stunted and broad, clung to his valley floor. In the distance, pinpricks of light suggested civilization of some kind, a mining outpost, most likely. His emergency beacon would bring the consortium down on him in hours if he activated it. Hugo needed to move, to find shelter, to figure out where his desperation had flung him. Getting out of the pilot's chair nearly broke him, his legs buckled under his own new weight, sending him crashing to the deck plates. Hugo crawled to the emergency kit. The stimulant injectors would help, for a while at least, but too many would stop his heart. One shot of stems, a mouthful of water, an atmosphere test that indicated breathable but thin air. Hugo dragged himself to the emergency hatch, twisted the manual release, and tumbled ungracefully onto alien soil. The impact knocked what little air he had from his lungs. He lay there, cheek pressed against rough stone, wondering if this was how it ended. A Harmon dying on an unknown rock, just like his brother had. Unlike Cal, though, he would die alone. A shadow fell across him. Hugo rolled over, the movement requiring all his remaining strength. Above him loomed a creature unlike anything he had encountered in the outer reach. 6 powerful legs supported a broad, armored body. The being stood nearly 7 feet tall, with what appeared to be multiple breathing vents along its sides that opened and closed in rhythmic patterns. Its carapace was the color of burnished copper, and where a head should be, a cluster of sensory appendages twitched and swiveled. The alien made a series of clicking sounds followed by deep vibrations that Hugo felt in his chest rather than heard. "Don't understand," Hugo gasped. The creature extended what might have been an arm or another leg, ending in a 3-digit appendage. After a moment's hesitation, Hugo grasped it, and the alien pulled him upright with surprising gentleness. The being tapped its midsection with an appendage, making that series of clicks again. "Croth?" Hugo hazarded, trying to mimic the sound. The creature, Croth, bobbed its sensory cluster in what might have been affirmation. Then it gestured toward the distant lights Hugo had noticed earlier. "No, not there," Hugo said, pointing to the opposite direction. "Your people. Your home." Croth's breathing vents widened, and the vibrations became more pronounced. After what seemed like internal deliberation, the alien turned and began walking away from the lights, looking back to ensure Hugo followed. Each step under the crushing gravity drained Hugo's reserves. The stems kept him moving, but his vision blurred at the edges. Croth slowed its pace, occasionally reaching out to steady Hugo when he stumbled. After what felt like hours, they crested a rise, and Hugo saw the hidden encampment. Dozens of structures had been carved directly into the rock face of a mountain valley. Interconnected by suspended walkways, larger beings like Croth moved about with surprising agility given the gravity, while smaller ones, juveniles perhaps, clustered around communal areas where food appeared to be shared. As they approached, other aliens noticed them. Breathing vents snapped shut, sensory clusters swiveled towards Hugo. The vibrations increased until Hugo felt them reverberating in his teeth. Croth responded with clicks and rumbles of its own. Hugo couldn't understand the exchange, but the tension in the air gradually dissipated. Several of the aliens approached, their movements cautious but curious. One reached out to touch Hugo's hair, recoiling when the strand slipped through its digits. "Different, I know," Hugo said with a strained smile. "Bet you haven't seen many humans around here." A particularly large alien stepped forward. Unlike the others, whose carapaces ranged from copper to deep purple, this one's shell was faded gray, etched with countless small scars that formed intricate patterns. Where the others moved with fluid strength, this one's movement seemed labored, as though the planet's pull was finally taking its toll after a lifetime of resistance. Croth made a deep, reverberating sound, lowering its sensory cluster in what Hugo interpreted as deference. "Akaru," Croth said, the sound startlingly clear. Then it pointed to Hugo. "Human." The elder, Akaru, approached Hugo slowly. It reached out with trembling appendages and placed them on either side of Hugo's head. The touch was surprisingly warm. "Wakum," Akaru said, the word heavily accented. but unmistakable. "To Thebes 9, your ship," Croth explained in broken trade language as they shared a meal of some kind of fermented root paste. "Why come? No humans here, only Gorax stick folk." After hours of halting communication, Hugo had learned that Thebes 9 was a mining world controlled by the Goraxian Consortium, the same corporation whose patrols he'd fled. The indigenous Tashar, as cross people called themselves, were being systematically pushed from their ancestral lands as mining operations expanded. "Not by choice," Hugo replied, struggling with the dense food. Everything on this high-gravity world seemed compressed, concentrated. "Accident. Emergency jump." Cross-breathing vents widened, a gesture Hugo was beginning to recognize as surprise. "Lucky, not lucky. Crash here, but alive. Korfolk would kill." Hugo nodded grimly. The Consortium didn't take kindly to independent operators, especially ones who had damaged their security drones. "Need to repair my ship. Get off world." Croth made a sound that might have been laughter, a rhythmic pulsing of its vents. "No leave. Gorax control all ships, all ports." It gestured to the mountain that sheltered them. "We hide here. Last place. Soon. Nowhere." Before Hugo could respond, commotion rippled through the encampment. The Tashar moved quickly toward the valley entrance. Cross stood, its carapace darkening. "What's happening?" Hugo asked, struggling to his feet. Even after hours on this world, the gravity crushed down on him like a vice. "Weight training," Croth answered, already moving. "Sacred time, but wrong vibrations." Hugo followed as best he could. They reached a gathered crowd of Tashar, all facing a natural depression in the valley floor. Within the depression, what the Tashar apparently called the gravity well, several armored figures moved among the Tashar who lay prostrate on the ground. Even from a distance, Hugo recognized the Consortium's insignia on their environmental suits. "Who are they?" Hugo asked, though he already suspected. "Dravix," Croth hissed. "Gorax strong arms. Come to mock weight learning." As they watched, one of the Dravix adjusted what appeared to be a portable gravity generator. The younger Tashar in the depression collapsed further, their carapaces groaning audibly under the increased pull. The Dravix laughed, a harsh sound even through their suit filters. "What's happening to them?" Hugo asked. "Weight training sacred," Croth explained, trembling with anger. "Young ones learn to bear weight. Our weight since first clutch. Dravix make double weight, mock struggle, break spirit." Hugo watched as one young Tashar attempted to rise, only to collapse with a sickening crack as its leg gave way. The Dravix jeered, increased the gravity again. Even at the edge of the depression, Hugo felt the increased pull tugging at him. "They're torturing them," Hugo said, disgust rising in his throat. "Yes," came an older voice. Elder Akuru had approached silently. "They break body, worse break tradition. Without weight learning, no Tashar become full adult." Hugo understood. This wasn't just cruelty. It was cultural destruction. The Consortium wasn't just taking Tashar land. They were eradicating Tashar identity. Hugo asked. "How?" Croth challenged. "They have weapons, numbers. This land now Gorax land. We have nothing." Hugo watched another young Tashar collapse, its breathing vents fluttering weakly. Something hot and familiar burned in his chest. the same rage he'd felt from watching corporate lawyers take his parents' mining claim, the same helplessness he'd experienced when retrieving his brother's body from a mining accident that should never have happened. "You have me," Hugo said, stepping forward. Croth grabbed his arm with surprising strength.
"No, they kill you, or worse, take to mines."
Hugo shook off the alien's grip.
"They're bullies. I know bullies."
He started down the slope toward the gravity well. The Draviks noticed his approach. 6 of them, reptilian species, bred for strength and intimidation. The leader was larger than the others, with molted orange scales and a metal cybernetic jaw that gleamed dully in the red sunlight.
Well,
the leader said, voice distorted through his suit speaker.
"A human into Shar territory."
"Turn those generators off," Hugo said, trying to keep his voice steady as the increased gravity of the depression pulled at him. The Draviks laughed.
"Or what?"
the leader asked.
"I am Sergeant Vax, Consortium Security. Who are you to give orders on a Goraxian mining world?"
"Just a guy who doesn't like seeing kids tortured," Hugo replied, nodding toward the young Tashars still pinned to the ground.
"Kids?"
Vax spat.
"These are primitives, obstacles to progress. We're teaching them their place in the new order."
He turned a dial on the control unit. The gravity increased again. Hugo felt the change immediately. It was like having a cargo container dropped on his shoulders. His spine compressed painfully, and he had to spread his feet to maintain his stance.
"See, even you can barely stand, human,"
Vax sneered.
"These creatures evolved here, and they still fail. The weak don't deserve sacred spaces or traditions."
Hugo had spent his life in variable gravity environments. Asteroid mining required adaptation to everything from zero-G to the unpredictable spin of unstable rocks. His body had acclimated to constant change. It wasn't the same as evolving on a high-gravity world, but it gave him one advantage: adaptability.
"Triple it,"
Hugo growled. Vax's reptilian features contorted in surprise.
"What?"
"You heard me," Hugo said, forcing himself to straighten despite the pain lancing through his back. "Triple the gravity. If a weak human can take it, what does that make you?" The Dravik's jaw clenched, a sign of agitation.
"You'll die."
Hugo smiled, showing teeth. "Scared I won't?" Vax hissed and turned the dial again. The pressure increased enormously, driving Hugo to his knees. Black spots danced at the edges of his vision. Every breath was a conscious act of will. His organs felt like they were being crushed against his spine. But he didn't collapse. Through sheer stubborn determination, the same force that had kept the Harmon family mining independently for 3 generations, Hugo remained upright on his knees. Blood vessels burst in his eyes, painting his vision red, but he maintained eye contact with Vax.
"Is that all?"
Uncertainty flickered across Vax's reptilian features. This wasn't how humans were supposed to react. They were soft-worlders, administrative species who relied on others for the brutal work of expansion. One of the other Draviks stepped forward, speaking quietly to Vax. The sergeant glanced at the gathered Tashar watching from the rim of the depression, then back at Hugo.
"This isn't over, human,"
Vax said, deactivating the gravity generator.
"The Consortium will want to know why an authorized visitor is on Thebes 9.
He gestured to his squad, and they retreated up the slope, casting backward glances at Hugo. The moment the artificial gravity field disappeared, Hugo collapsed fully, gasping as his compressed lungs expanded again. His vision swam, and he tasted copper in the back of his throat. He had pushed his body beyond safe limits. Small appendages touched his shoulders. The young Tushar, recovering faster than he was, helped him to a sitting position. At the depression's edge, Elder Akuru watched. Behind him, the gathered Tushar vibrated in unison, creating a deep thrumming that Hugo felt in his bones. Groth approached, extending an appendage to help Hugo up.
You stood,
the alien said simply.
in triple weight.
Not very well, Hugo replied, accepting the help. His legs trembled as he gained his feet.
No off-worlder ever stand in double weight,
Groth said.
Never triple, never.
Elder Akuru descended carefully into the depression, moving with a deliberate pace of one who has carried great weight for far too long. When he reached Hugo, he placed his appendages on Hugo's shoulders, much as he had when they first met.
The light-born who carries worlds upon shoulders,
Akuru intoned in halting trade language.
Ancient words speak of you.
Hugo frowned. What are you talking about? But Akuru had already turned to the gathered Tushar, speaking rapidly in their clicking, vibrating language. The response was immediate, a wave of vibrations that made small stones dance on the ground around them. Groth leaned close to Hugo.
He says you prophesy birth, one who bears the weight when others cannot, the savior of Tushar ways.
Hugo shook his head. I'm not a savior. I'm just a miner who hates bullies.
Same thing, maybe,
Groth replied, helping Hugo from the depression.
Rest now. Tomorrow, much talk.
As they made their way back to the encampment, Hugo glanced over his shoulder. The young Tushar had returned to the gravity well, resuming their training with renewed vigor. Above them, Elder Akuru watched. Savior. Hugo almost laughed despite the pain. He couldn't even save his own brother. How was he supposed to save an entire alien civilization? Hugo awoke to something prodding his shoulder. He opened his eyes to see Groth standing over him.
Get up,
The Tushar said urgently.
must go, now.
Hugo sat up, wincing as his abused muscles protested. After yesterday's confrontation at the gravity well, he had collapsed on a sleeping pallet in one of the rock's dwellings, his body demanding recovery. What's happening? He asked, reaching for his boots.
Lass taken.
Groth replied, vibrating with distress.
My sister, consortium raiders, came nighttime. Took workers for deep mine.
Took her where?
Main dig. Big hole in mountainside.
Groth pointed northward.
Deepest shafts where even Tushar struggle with weight. Humans need special suits there. Many die.
The lights, that's where they're mining?
Yes, dig for heavy metal. Tight.
Groth pronounced the word carefully.
Worth many ships, many worlds.
Gravitite. Hugo had heard rumors of the ultra-dense element, essential for next-generation FTL drives and weapon systems. If the consortium had found a major deposit, it explained the aggressive expansion on Thebes 9.
I need to talk to Akuru,
Hugo said, pulling on his jacket. Figure out what to do.
Akuru, sick. Wait, years, pressing down. Many Tushar, say you, help. Prophecy, human.
Hugo ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Look, I'm not part of any prophecy. I need to repair my ship and get off this rock.
Ship broken, beyond fixing.
Groth said bluntly.
Checked while you sleep. FTL core cracked. Hull warped. No fly again.
The news hit Hugo harder than he expected. The Sisyphus wasn't just a ship. It was his home, his inheritance, the last connection to his family. Without it, he was truly stranded.
Then I need to find another way off-world,
Hugo muttered.
Help find Lassa first,
Cross said, a pleading quality in his vibrations.
She gravity healer, uses weight to fix injuries, sickness. Tashar need her. I need her.
Hugo hesitated. Every instinct told him to focus on his own survival, to find a way to escape before the consortium got to him. But the image of the young Tashar collapsing under artificially doubled gravity returned to him. How much worse would it be in the deep mines?
What's your plan?
He asked finally.
You go to mine. Say, you human prospector want work. Humans valued in deep places where Tashar and Dravik struggle. Find Lassa. Bring out.
That's not a plan. That's a suicide mission, Hugo said. Cross carapace darkened.
You stood in triple weight. You strong body human. You can.
Fine. But I do this my way. The consortium's main mining facility was a massive scar carved into the mountainside, ringed by prefabricated structures and heavy equipment. Hugo approached openly, having shed his distinctive miner's jacket for more generic workwear stolen from a consortium supply cache Croth had shown him. The guards at the main gate barely glanced at the identification chip Hugo had also liberated from the cache. With the constant flow of workers and equipment, one more human laborer hardly registered as a security concern. Inside, the facility hummed with activity. Automated loading drones shifted raw ore onto processing belts. Engineers monitored extraction rates on glowing displays. Laborers from a dozen different species moved through the complex, all bearing the weight of Thebes 9 in their postures. Hugo made his way toward what appeared to be the administrative center, a 3-story prefab with the consortium logo emblazoned across its front. If he was going to locate Lassa, he needed information. The reception area was staffed by a bored-looking Salaxian.
Help you?
It asked without looking up.
Looking for the new worker assignment officer,
Hugo said confidently.
Just arrived on world.
The Salaxian waved a webbed hand toward a corridor.
Human Resources, 2nd floor. Director Reeves conducting orientations today.
Hugo thanked the receptionist and made his way up the stairs. On the 2nd floor, he found a line of new arrivals waiting outside a conference room.
You here for orientation?
Asked a human woman at the end of the line, her face gaunt from the gravity.
Yeah,
Hugo replied.
Heard they're paying hazard for the deep shafts.
The woman snorted.
If you survive. My cousin lasted 2 months before his spine compressed. Now he's on disability back in the Riven sector, pissing in a bag.
Sounds like the consortium's looking after its people as usual,
Hugo said dryly.
Keep your voice down,
the woman whispered.
Director Reeves doesn't tolerate complainers.
Before Hugo could respond, the conference room door opened and a tall, thin woman with startlingly white hair emerged. Despite the crushing gravity, she stood straight, her movements fluid and confident, the mark of someone who had invested in expensive gravitational compensators.
Next group,
she announced, surveying the line with cold efficiency. Inside the conference room, a holo display showed a 3-dimensional rendering of a mining operation, a massive network of shafts and tunnels penetrating deep into the planet's crust. Director Reeves stood before it, hands clasped behind her back.
Welcome to Thebes 9,
she began, her voice carrying the cultivated accent of Earth's upper administrative class.
You're here because you're either desperate or ambitious. Either way, you'll serve the consortium's interest. In return, you'll be compensated at rates that reflect the unique challenges of this environment. She gestured to the display, which zoomed in on the deepest tunnel systems. We're extracting gravitite, the rarest and most valuable element in known space. 1 kilogram is worth more than most of you will earn in a lifetime. The deposits on Thebes 9 are the largest ever discovered. The indigenous species, the Tashar, will be working alongside you. Reeves continued, a note of dismissal in her tone. They're naturally adapted to high-gravity environments, but lack the technical skills necessary for modern extraction methods. Consider them labor assets, not colleagues. A hand raised in the back, an Avarian with silvery skin.
Ma'am, I heard rumors about Tashar sabotage in the lower levels. Is there any security concern?
Reeves smiled thinly. The Tashar are primitives, clinging to superstitious traditions. Their sacred sites happen to sit atop the richest gravitite veins on the planet. Their resistance is being managed.
Managed how?
Hugo asked before he could stop himself. Reeves turned her cold gaze on him. You are?
Hugo Harper, he lied. Independent surveyor.
Well, Mr. Harper, Reeves said, studying him with growing interest, we're relocating the Tashar to designated reservations away from our primary extraction zones. Those who choose to work with us rather than against us are compensated appropriately. Those who don't, she shrugged elegantly. Progress requires sacrifice. The briefing continued with technical details about equipment, shift rotations, and safety protocols. Throughout, Director Reeves occasionally glanced his way, her expression calculating. When the orientation ended, the new workers filed out to receive their assignments. Hugo waited, pretending to study the facility map displayed near the door. As he had hoped, Reeves approached him. Mr. Harper, she said, a moment of your time. Hugo turned, keeping his expression neutral. Director? Independent surveys are rare these days, she observed. Most have been absorbed by the major corporations. What brings one to Thebes 9?
Money, Hugo replied simply. Gravitite surveys pay better than standard mineral work, and I prefer to set my own contracts.
Reeves smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. Admirable. We could use someone with your independent thinking for a special project. Hugo raised an eyebrow, feigning interest.
I'm listening.
Walk with me, she said, leading him from the conference room down a private corridor. They entered a secure lift that began descending immediately. The Tashar are becoming increasingly problematic as we expand our operations. They've occupied this planet for millennia, yet have barely progressed beyond Stone Age technology. Their only contribution to galactic civilization will be moving aside for the resources beneath their sacred sites. The lift continued down, the increasing pressure making Hugo's ears pop. Even with his adaptability, he could feel the difference as they descended. We've discovered the main gravitite deposit lies directly beneath what the Tashar call their primary gravity well, a natural depression where gravitational forces are amplified by the mineral composition of the surrounding rock. They use it for primitive coming-of-age rituals. She waved a hand dismissively. The deposit is worth approximately 17 trillion credits at current market rates. The lift slowed and the doors opened onto our research level, unlike the industrial mining operation above. Scientists moved between workstations, examining core samples and data displays. The problem, Reeves continued, is that conventional mining would take decades to reach the main deposit. We've developed an alternative approach. She led Hugo to a secure laboratory where a team of engineers worked on what appeared to be spherical devices roughly the size of a human head. Hugo recognized the fundamental design. Gravity bombs. Localized gravitational disruptors, Reeves explained, noting Hugo's expression. When placed strategically around the well, they'll create controlled gravitational collapse, fracturing the crust and allowing direct access to the gravitite deposit.
And the Tashar?
Will need to be relocated, of course. The affected area will experience gravitational fluctuations, rendering it temporarily uninhabitable. She smiled coldly. a small price for such progress. Hugo understood the euphemism. The bombs would create gravitational distortions that would tear the Tashar settlement apart, killing hundreds, if not thousands. The consortium would call it an industrial accident, pay nominal reparations to survivors, and extract trillions in profit.
Where do I fit in?
He asked. We need detailed gravitational surveys of the well and surrounding area. The Tashar are uncooperative with our science teams, but I've received reports that they've shown unusual interest in solitary humans. Your cover as an independent surveyor would be perfect for gathering the data we need. The irony wasn't lost on Hugo.
When would I start?
Immediately. We're on an accelerated timeline. The consortium board expects results within the month. Reeves studied him carefully. The compensation would be substantial.
I'll need to see the indigenous labor conditions first,
Hugo said, thinking quickly.
Understand the Tashar better to gain their trust. Maybe interview some of your Tashar workers.
Reeves's eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded. A reasonable approach. I'll arrange a tour of the deep mining operation. She checked her wrist display. In fact, we're moving a new group of Tashar laborers to level 8 this afternoon. You can observe the interrogation process.
Perfect.
The deep mining levels of the consortium facility existed in a twilight state, emergency lighting only, to save power for the gravity compensators that allowed the human workers to function at all. Even with compensation, the pressure was intense. Hugo's bones ached with each step as he followed the security detail, escorting new Tashar laborers to their work assignments. Level 8 was more cavern than constructed space, a vast chamber carved from the living rock by mining drones. The air was thick with stone dust and the metallic tang of raw gravitite. The Tashar prisoners shuffled forward in restraints designed to limit their natural strength. Hugo scanned their ranks, looking for any that matched Cross's description of Lassa. Near the back of the group, a smaller Tashar stumbled.
Keep moving,
Barked a Dravic guard, shoving the faltering alien. Hugo recognized the distinctive markings as the prisoner turned. This was Lassa. Her carapace had dulled from its natural green to a sickly gray, and one of her legs dragged uselessly behind her.
This one's injured, Hugo said, stepping forward. Not much use as a worker in that condition.
The Dravic guard glared at him.
Director's orders. All captured Tashar work or are disposed of.
Hugo thought quickly.
I need a native guide for my survey work. This one looks intelligent. I'll take responsibility for it.
The guard hesitated, then shrugged.
Your problem, then. Sign here.
He thrust a datapad at Hugo, who thumbprinted it without reading the details. Lassa quivered as Hugo approached. He removed her restraints carefully, pretending to examine her as though assessing a piece of equipment.
I'm a friend of Cross, he whispered. I'm getting you out of here.
The Tashar went completely still, her breathing vents closing in surprise.
How?
Working on that part.
He glanced around the chamber, noting the security checkpoints, the guard positions, the ventilation shafts. There had to be a way out that didn't involve climbing back up through 8 levels of heavily guarded mining facility. A tremor ran through the floor, causing loose rock to shower down from the cavern ceiling. The workers paused, looking up nervously.
Happens all the time,
one of the human miners said, noticing Hugo's concern.
They're pushing too deep too fast, destabilizing the whole area. Where's the main gravitite vein?
Hugo asked. The miner pointed to the far wall of the cavern.
Through there. They hit a pocket, sensors show the mother lode is another 20 meters in. Problem is, the gravity gets exponentially worse. Even the Tashar can't handle it without special equipment.
Hugo nodded his things and led Lassa toward the active mining face, maintaining the pretense of a supervisory inspection. As they moved away from the guards, he spoke quietly.
We need to find a way that doesn't involve going back up through the facility.
There are old tunnels Tashar made from before Consortium. Some connect to face near Sacred Well.
Can you find them?
Yes.
She tapped one leg against the floor.
Feel vibrations. Follow weight flow.
Hugo nodded. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was better than nothing.
We need a distraction.
Another tremor shook the cavern, stronger this time. Warning lights flashed on the environmental monitors along the walls.
Gravitational anomaly,
Shouted a technician.
pressure spike in Section 3.
The announcement sent workers scrambling for reinforced safety zones marked on the cavern floor. The guards moved to herd the Deshar prisoners toward a containment area.
Now,
Hugo muttered, pulling Lassa toward the mining face where the tremors seemed strongest.
where are these tunnels?
Lassa pressed her body against the rock wall. After a moment, she moved decisively along the perimeter, feeling the stone with every step. She stopped at what appeared to be a solid section of wall, partially hidden by a massive drilling apparatus.
Here, old air channel.
Hugo examined the wall, finding a nearly invisible seam in the rock.
Stand back.
He grabbed a plasma cutter from a nearby tool rack and activated it, the superheated beam slicing through the stone with ease. The cut revealed a narrow passage behind.
You first.
Hugo urged, glancing back at the chaotic cavern. The guards were still distracted by the gravitational alerts. Lassa squeezed in the opening, her carapace scraping against the rough stone. Hugo followed, finding the passage even tighter than it had appeared. The walls pressed in from all sides, the planet's pull making every movement a struggle. They had crawled perhaps 50 meters when the real quake hit. The tunnel convulsed around them, stones dropping from the ceiling, a support being collapsed behind them, sealing off their retreat.
Move!
Hugo shouted, pushing Lassa forward as the tunnel continued to collapse around them. They emerged into a larger chamber just as the passage behind them gave way completely. Hugo fell to his knees, gasping in the dust-filled air. The chamber was clearly Deshar-made, with smooth walls carved with intricate patterns that seemed to flow like water frozen in time. Lassa touched the wall reverently.
Ancestor place. Old mining. Before Gorax came.
Another tremor shook the chamber, cracks appearing in the ceiling, widening visibly as the gravitational forces intensified.
Which way to the surface?
Hugo asked urgently. Lassa hesitated, her injured leg buckling beneath her.
Unsure. Tunnels change with weight shifts.
Hugo moved to support her, feeling the incredible pressure increasing by the second. They were deep, deeper than humans were meant to go on a world like Thebes 9. Each breath required conscious effort, his lungs straining against the enormous pressure on his chest.
We need to move,
he managed to say.
Any direction, just move.
They chose a tunnel that sloped upward, however slightly. Every step was agony now. His vision narrowed to a pinpoint, blood vessels bursting in his eyes from the pressure. Lassa collapsed entirely. Hugo knelt beside her, his own body screaming for surrender.
Leave, she gasped. Deshar, die with dignity, in weight.
No one's dying today, Hugo growled, though he could feel his own consciousness fading. With the last of his strength, he pulled the alien, her body impossibly heavy under the crushing gravity. One step, another. Hugo's world reduced to the simple act of placing one foot before the other, fighting not just the planet's pull, but the very limitations of his human physiology. Blood trickled from his nose, his ears, the corners of his eyes, his spine compressed painfully with each step. When he finally collapsed, Hugo had no idea how far they'd come. He lay beside Lassa in the darkness, waiting for the end. The ground beneath them shifted again, not violently, but with purpose. A section of the floor slid away, revealing a new passage. Light filtered up from below, along with a familiar vibration. Deshar voices, dozens of them, creating a harmonic rumble that seemed to counteract the crushing weight, if only slightly. Hands reached up to pull them down into a larger chamber. Hugo recognized Croth among the rescuers.
Breathe,
Someone urged, placing an oxygen mask over Hugo's face.
you're safe now.
Hugo drifted in and out of consciousness as the rescuers carried him and Lassa through the tunnel network. When he finally regained full awareness, he was lying on a sleeping pallet in the Tashar encampment, his body wrapped in cooling bandages. Croth sat nearby, sensory appendages tracking Hugo's movements as he stirred.
You live?
The Tashar observed.
Good. Lassa,
Hugo croaked, his throat raw.
healing. You saved from deep weight, carried her where no off-worlder should stand.
Cross's carapace brightened.
Prophecy, truth.
Hugo struggled to sit up.
About that prophecy.
No real, came a female voice from the entrance. Lassa limped into the dwelling. One leg still visibly damaged, but her carapace returned to a healthier green hue.
A Kuru invention. Political tool. Desperate need.
What? Hugo looked between the siblings in confusion. Cross-breathing vents narrowed in what might have been embarrassment.
Elder dying. Tashar divided on our fight consortium. Some want war, some want surrender. Akuru needed unity symbol.
So he made me into some mythical savior? Hugo asked, anger flaring despite his weakness.
Not all false,
Lassa said, settling onto a stone bench.
Old stories speak of outsiders who helped Tashar in time of need. Akuru adapted truth for now-time needs.
Hugo fell back onto the pallet, digesting this information.
Great. So I've been risking my life for a political ploy.
You risked for right reasons,
Lassa countered.
Saw injustice, acted truth in core, if not details.
Before Hugo could respond, another Tashar entered, one he hadn't met before, distinguished by battle scars and a missing appendage.
Human awake? Good. Need talk now.
The newcomer's trade language was rough, but direct.
Consortium moving death machines to Sacred Well. 2-day time.
Hugo sat up, ignoring the pain.
Death machines?
Gravity bombs,
Lassa explained.
Tashar scouts report consortium transporting devices to Sacred Well, preparing for mining operation.
They're moving faster than Reeves indicated.
Hugo remembered.
The bombs will fracture the crust, create direct access to the gravitite deposit beneath the Sacred Well, and kill all Tashar in region.
The scarred Tashar added grimly.
I, Thorn, resistance leader, say from start, prophecy foolish. Need fight, not wait for sky savior.
That's what they want. Not just after the gravitite, Hugo said, struggling to his feet. Reeves wants to eliminate the Tashar resistance in one strike. Make it look like an industrial accident. Croth clicked rapidly, communicating something to the others that Hugo couldn't understand. Lassa responded with her own series of vibrations before turning to Hugo.
A Kuru dying,
she said solemnly.
Ask for you.
The Elder's dwelling was dark, illuminated only by bioluminescent fungi that cast a soft blue glow over the worn stone. Akaru lay on a raised platform, his once massive frame visibly diminished. The exoskeleton faded and brittle with age.
Prophet human,
he wheezed as Hugo entered.
Come close.
Hugo approached reluctantly, still conflicted about the false prophecy.
I'm no prophet, Elder. You know that.
Kuru's breathing vents opened in what might have been a chuckle.
No, many things, not all shareable, until now.
He reached for Hugo's hand.
Sit, listen.
Hugo sat on the stone floor beside the platform. Akuru's grip was surprisingly strong despite his weakened state.
Prophecy, political, yes,
the Elder admitted.
But based on true stories. Ancient Tishar speak of light-born helpers, not saviors, partners.
From beneath his platform, Akuru withdrew a small object, a dense, dark stone that seemed to pulse with an inner light.
Sacred weight stone from planet core responds to those who respect weight.
The stone was impossibly heavy for its size, like holding a neutron star in his palm. It thrummed with energy that Hugo felt in his bones.
Tishar connection to gravity, biological.
Akuru explained.
Not just adaptation, symbiosis. Planet speaks through weight. Humans, others, hear only silence. But you,
His hand brushed Hugo's face.
you, beginning to listen.
Hugo stared at the stone. What am I supposed to do with this?
Lead. Not because prophecy says, because right thing.
Akuru's breathing became labored.
Consortium bombs will break more than rock. Break weight flows. Damage spread beyond Sacred Well, beyond Tishar lands. Affect all world.
The gravity bombs could trigger a planetary gravitational disruption.
Yes, Consortium not understand weight balance. See only metal beneath feet.
Akuru's grip tightened on Hugo's hand.
Take stone. Go to Sacred Well. Stone responds to true weight knowers. We'll show way.
The elder's breathing vents fluttered one final time, then closed. His appendages relaxed, releasing Hugo's hand. The vibrations that had constantly emanated from his body ceased. Elder Akuru was gone. The Tashar moved with surprising speed after Akuru's death. Within hours, a plan had formed, part Hugo's mining expertise, part Tashar knowledge of the world's gravitational peculiarities. Thorn, the scarred resistance leader, had reluctantly accepted Hugo's leadership for the coming confrontation, bringing his fighters into the fold. Consortium forces here, here, and here, Hugo explained, marking positions on a rough map of the Sacred Well. They'll position the gravity bombs at these points to create a symmetrical collapse.
How we stop?
Croth asked, studying the map. We use your natural sensitivity to gravity against them, Hugo replied. Lassa says Tashar can detect gravitational fluctuations. If we position your people at key points around the well, you can warn us when the bombs begin their activation sequence. Thorn growled.
Warning, not enough. Need stop. Not now when dying starts.
That's where these come in, Hugo said, showing the improvised devices he'd constructed from salvaged mining equipment. Gravitational dampeners. Not powerful enough to stop the bombs completely, but they might buy us time to physically disable them. And if fell? Lassa asked, her healing leg now supporting her weight again. Hugo held up Akuru's stone. Then we try this. I don't know what exactly it does, but Akuru seemed to think it could counteract the bomb somehow. None of them questioned this last, desperate option. The Tashar's faith in the Elder's wisdom remained unshaken, even knowing he had invented aspects of the prophecy. As dusk fell, they moved out, a mixed force of Tashar warriors and the few human miners who had joined their cause after learning of the Consortium's plans. Hugo's body still ached from his ordeal in the deep mines, but the driving urgency of their mission pushed pain aside. They reached the ridge overlooking the sacred well as the last light faded from the deep's rust-colored sky. Below, consortium forces had established a perimeter around the natural depression. Engineers worked under powerful lights, positioning the spherical gravity bombs at precise intervals around the well's circumference. Hugo spotted Director Reeves supervising the operation. Sergeant Vac stood at our side, a squad of Dravik security forces arrayed behind them.
They almost ready,
Thorne observed.
time short.
Hugo nodded. Remember the plan. Tashar gravitational sensors at the 5 points. Dampener teams move in only when the bombs enter pre-activation. My team goes for the control center. He patted the weight stone secured in a pouch at his hip. Let's move. The resistance forces split into their assigned groups, moving silently down the slopes surrounding the sacred well. Hugo led his team, Croth, Lassa, and 3 human miners, toward the mobile command center where Reeves would trigger the detonation sequence. They had nearly reached their position when a security drone spotted them, its alarm shattering the night. Spotlights swung in their direction, momentarily blinding Hugo.
Intruders at Sector 5,
A voice called out.
security teams respond.
So much for the surprise. New plan. Straight ahead, full speed.
They broke cover, racing toward the command center. Consortium security forces opened fire, plasma bolts scorching the ground around them. The Tashar moved with startling speed despite the planet's pull. Their bodies evolved for this gravity. Across the well, other resistant groups engaged consortium forces, creating the chaotic distraction they needed. Hugo saw Thorne leading a direct assault on one of the bomb placements. Tashar warriors overwhelming the guards through the sheer numeric advantage. Hugo Harmon! Director Reeves' voice echoed across the well, amplified by the command center systems. I should have recognized you from the security bulletins. The asteroid pirate who crashed on our little mining world. Hugo didn't bother responding, focusing instead on reaching the command center. A Dravik guard appeared before him, weapon raised. Hugo ducked under the shot, using the planet's gravity to pull him into a rolling tackle that took the guard's legs out from under him. Croth disposed of 2 more guards, his powerful limbs making short work of the opposition. They reached the command center's outer perimeter just as alarms began blaring throughout the complex. Gravity bomb activation sequence initiated, an automated voice announced. Detonation in 3 minutes. All personnel evacuate to minimum safe distance. Too late, Reeves called out, appearing at the command center entrance. The process can't be stopped now, Harmon. The gravitational cascade has begun. Behind her, display screens showed energy readings spiking as the bombs entered their final activation phase. Tashar resistance fighters attempting to reach the device were being driven back by intensifying gravitational fields.
You don't understand what you're doing.
Hugo shouted over the growing distortion of space around them. Already, he could feel the increased pull as the bombs began warping the local gravitational field.
These bombs won't just break open the crust. They'll destabilize the entire region's gravitational stability.
A calculated risk, Reeves replied calmly. The consortium's profit projections account for environmental remediation costs. A sudden tremor shook the ground, more violent than any Hugo had felt before. One of the bombs had begun to malfunction, its containment field fluctuating wildly. The gravitational distortion spread visibly through the air like heat waves on a scorching day.
Evacuate!
Vax shouted to his security forces, genuine fear in his reptilian features.
Gravitational cascade imminent!
Consortium personnel fled toward waiting transport vehicles. Reeves hesitated, looking back at her control screens. 17 trillion credits, she murmured, almost to herself. Worth any risk. Hugo reached for the weight stone. It pulsed against his palm, vibrating in harmony with the planet beneath him. The Tashar around him began a deep, rhythmic thrumming that resonated with the stone's energy.
Lassa,
Hugo called.
how do I activate this thing?
The gravity healer moved to his side, despite the increasing gravitational pressure.
Not activate. Harmonize. Feel weight flow. Direct. Not control.
Hugo closed his eyes, focusing on the stone's vibrations. The crushing gravity of Thebes 9 had been his enemy since arrival, a constant pressure that threatened to break his human body. Now he embraced it, accepting the planet's pull as Akuru had taught. The stone grew warmer in his hand, its vibrations intensifying. Hugo felt a strange connection forming, not just to the stone, but to the gravitational field around him. He could sense the bombs' disruption patterns, the unnatural warping of space they created. "There," he whispered, opening his eyes. "I can feel it." He stepped forward, moving not against the gravity, but with it, letting it guide his movements. The weight stone grew brighter, pulsing with each step. "Get clear," he told the others. "I think this is about to get interesting." The Tashar and human resistance fighters retreated, forming a perimeter around the sacred well. Only Croth remained at Hugo's side, unwilling to abandon him. As the bombs reached critical activation, Hugo entered the center of the sacred well. Here, where the natural gravitational anomalies of Thebes 9 were strongest, he felt the planet's true power. He raised the stone high, its light now bright enough to illuminate the entire depression. The bomb's distortion fields collided with the stone's energy, creating a visible clash of forces that bent light itself. For a moment, Hugo thought he had failed. The pressure increased beyond anything he had experienced before, driving him to his knees. Blood vessels burst in his eyes, painting his vision crimson. His bones creaked under the strain. Then, slowly, the stone's energy expanded, forming a dome over the sacred well. The bombs' disruptive fields bent around it, their energy redirected back into themselves. One by one, they imploded, collapsing into minute singularities that winked out of existence. The pressure lifted suddenly, leaving Hugo gasping on the ground. The weight stone continued to glow softly in his hand, now permanently bonded to his palm. Around the sacred well, consortium forces fled in disorder, abandoning equipment and weapons in their panic. Director Reeves stood alone by the command center, staring at Hugo with a mixture of fear and scientific curiosity. "What are you?" she asked as he approached. "Just a miner," Hugo replied. 1 month later, Hugo stood at the edge of the sacred well, watching young Tashar perform their coming-of-age ritual under Lass's guidance. His hand absently stroked the weight stone, now embedded into his palm like a second heart, pulsing in rhythm with the planet's gravitational fluctuations.
"Still feels strange?"
Croth asked, approaching from behind.
Getting used to it,"
Hugo replied.
"Your sister says the connection will strengthen over time. Already, I can sense gravitational fields I never noticed before."
In the month since the confrontation at the sacred well, much had happened. Much had changed on Thebes 9. The consortium had withdrawn most of its forces after footage of the attempted bombing leaked to galactic authorities. Sanctions were pending, and Director Reeves faced criminal charges for the illegal use of gravitational weaponry. More importantly, Hugo had brokered a deal with Bex Harlow, an independent trader with connections to Nova Minerals, a smaller corporation eager to gain a foothold in gravitite extraction. The agreement established a joint human-Tashar mining operation that would extract the valuable element sustainability, without destroying the sacred sites or displacing the indigenous population.
"New miners arrive tomorrow,"
Croth noted.
"You ready for roll?"
Hugo nodded. As part of the agreement, he would serve as intermediary between the human mining teams and the Tashar, ensuring that extraction methods respected both Tashar traditions and the planet's delicate gravitational balance.
Never thought I'd end up working for a corporation,
Hugo said with a wry smile.
My father would be spinning in his recycler.
Not for corporation,
Croth corrected.
for balance. Different thing.
In the distance, a ship descended through Thebes 9's atmosphere. The first transport of new mining personnel. Hugo felt the subtle gravitational disturbance of its mass even before he saw it. A new sensitivity that still surprised him.
You know,
Hugo said, watching the young Tashar complete their ritual, standing proudly under the natural weight of their world.
your father's prophecy wasn't entirely wrong.
How so?
Croth asked.
He said I'd lead the Tashar in a final stand against those who would steal your sacred grounds.
Hugo gestured to the new mining equipment being installed on the far side of the valley. Equipment designed with Tashar input to work with the planet's gravitational flows rather than against them.
But he didn't say we wouldn't find a better way forward afterward.
Cross-breathing vents widened in what Hugo now recognized as their version of a smile.
Maybe prophecy true after all. Just needed right interpreter.
Hugo felt the weight stone pulse in his palm as he looked out over the valley that had become his new home. The constant gravity of Thebes 9 still pressed down on him, still made each day a physical challenge. But now, he understood what Akuru had tried to teach him. That sometimes, the greatest strength came not from fighting against the weight of worlds, but from learning to carry it with purpose.